They called her the billion-dollar brat. Tabitha Holloway wasn't just spoiled, she was a natural disaster in designer heels. She had chewed up and spit out former CIA agents, Oxford-educated nannies, and the toughest security teams money could buy. Her father, tech mogul Preston Holloway, was out of options. He thought his daughter was unbreakable. He was wrong. He didn't know that the only person capable of bringing the Holloway dynasty to its knees and then saving it wasn't a psychologist or a bodyguard. It was a broke, invisible waitress named Sarah, armed with nothing but a tray of dirty martinis and a secret that would change everything. This is the story of how the impossible became inevitable. The sound of shattering crystal is distinctive. It doesn't just break, it sings before it dies. That was the sound that silenced L'Eclat, the most pretentious and exclusive supper club on Manhattan's Upper East Side, on a rainy Tuesday in November. The restaurant was the kind of place where the water bill cost more than most people's rent. It was a sanctuary for the untouchables, senators, oil tycoons, and tech gods. And standing in the center of the carnage was Tabitha Holloway. At 19, Tabitha looked like a Renaissance painting that someone had slashed with a knife. She was undeniably beautiful, with the Holloway dark eyes and sharp jawline, wearing a vintage Dior slip dress that probably cost $40,000. But right now, she was vibrating with a cold, manic rage. At her feet lay the remains of a 1982 Chateau Margaux and the splattered dignity of the floor manager, Jean-Luc. I said. Tabitha's voice wasn't loud, which made it terrifying. It was a low, bored drawl. I don't want the table by the window. I want that table, the one occupied by the sad little man with the comb over. The sad little man was a federal judge. Jean-Luc, wiping red wine from his pristine white jacket, stammered, "Miss Holloway, please. That represents a conflict of interest for the—" "I don't care," Tabitha cut him off, grabbing a bread knife from a nearby setting. She didn't raise it like a weapon. She just started idly carving deep, jagged scratches into the mahogany table surface. Scritch. 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 Move him, or I start screaming. And you know, Jean-Luc, when I scream, Daddy gets sued. The room was frozen. This was the Tabitha Holloway effect. She was the radioactive core of the Holloway empire. Her father, Preston Holloway, was the founder of Ether Systems, a private defense contractor that essentially ran the internet security for half the Western world. He was a man who could topple governments with a phone call, yet he couldn't control his teenage daughter. In the shadows of the service station, Sarah Jenkins watched. Sarah was 24, exhausted, and currently invisible. That was her superpower. When you're a waitress at L'Eclat, you aren't a person, you are a moving object that delivers carbohydrates and alcohol. Sarah had been working double shifts for 6 months to pay off a student loan debt that was drowning her. She was a psychology dropout, forced to quit her master's program when her mother got sick, and she had learned more about human behavior waiting tables than she ever had in a lecture hall. She watched Tabitha. She didn't see a brat. She saw a performance. Tabitha wasn't looking at the judge she was trying to displace. She wasn't looking at the terrified manager. She was looking at the door. She was checking the time on her phone. She's waiting for an audience, Sarah thought. She doesn't want the table. She wants a reaction. "Miss Holloway," Jean-Luc pleaded, signaling for security. 2 large men in black suits, ex-Mossad types that L'Eclat kept on retainer, began to move in. This was usually how it ended. Tabitha would create a scene. Security would escort her out. She'd end up on TMZ, and Preston Holloway would cut a check to silence everyone involved. It was a rich girl's ritual. But tonight, Tabitha escalated. As the security guards approached, Tabitha grabbed a heavy silver candelabra. The flame flickered dangerously close to the velvet drapes. "Don't touch me," she hissed, her eyes wide and glassy. "I swear to God, you touch me, and I'll burn this place down." The guards hesitated. They knew who her father was. If they bruised her arm, their careers were over. If they let her burn the place down, their careers were over. It was a stalemate. The air was thick with tension. The federal judge was hiding behind his menu. Sarah sighed. She looked at the tray in her hand, 3 espressos and a biscotti. She checked her apron pocket. She had exactly $12 to her name until payday on Friday. She needed this job. She needed the tips. And if this girl burned the restaurant down, Sarah wouldn't get paid. Sarah walked out of the shadows. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She walked with the rhythmic, heavy-footed pace of someone whose feet hurt. She walked right past the paralyzed security guards, right past the trembling Jean-Luc, and slammed her tray down on the table Tabitha was currently vandalizing. The loud clang of the metal tray startled Tabitha. The bread knife slipped. The candelabra wobbled. Tabitha whipped her head around, her eyes narrowing. "Who the hell are you?" Sarah didn't look at her. She started clearing the broken wine glass shards, picking them up with her bare hands, carelessly. "I'm the person whose shift ends in 20 minutes, Sarah said, her voice flat. "And you're making this shift feel like a decade." The room gasped. You did not speak to Tabitha Holloway like that. Tabitha looked stunned. "Do you know who I am?" "Yeah," Sarah said, tossing the glass shards onto her tray. "You're the reason I'm not going to get a tip from table 4, because they're too scared to eat their risotto." Sarah finally looked up. She locked eyes with Tabitha. She didn't look at her with fear or admiration or even anger. She looked at her with pure, unadulterated boredom. "You're checking the door," Sarah said quietly, so only Tabitha could hear. Tabitha froze. "What?" "You keep checking the door. You're waiting for him. Your dad. Or maybe his fixer, Mr. Crowley." Sarah wiped the table with a rag. "They aren't coming, kid. I saw the news alert on the bar TV. Preston is in Tokyo for the G7 summit. He's not coming to save you, and he's not coming to yell at you. You're performing for an empty theater." Tabitha's face went pale. The mask of the billion-dollar brat slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a terrified, lonely child. Then the rage returned, hotter than before. "You stupid servant," Tabitha spat, raising the candelabra again. "I could buy your life. You couldn't afford my student loans," Sarah deadpanned. Then she did the impossible. Sarah reached into her apron, pulled out a lighter. She kept it for lighting candles, and flicked it on. She held the small flame up, inches from the sprinkler sensor on the ceiling above them. "You want to burn it down?" Sarah challenged, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Let's save time. I trigger the sprinklers. Everyone gets soaked. The makeup runs. The paparazzi outside get a photo of you looking like a drowned rat. And the FDNY shuts us down for the night. I go home early. You go home, to that empty penthouse." Sarah held the flame steady. "Call my bluff, Tabitha." For 10 seconds, the entire restaurant held its breath. The billionaire's daughter and the waitress. Fire and ice. Tabitha stared at the flame, then at Sarah's tired, unyielding eyes. She saw something she had never seen in her paid entourage. Someone who had nothing left to lose. Tabitha lowered the candelabra. She dropped the bread knife. It clattered on the table. "I want a Diet Coke," Tabitha whispered, her voice trembling, "with a lime." "Sit down," Sarah ordered, pointing to the chair. "I'll bring it, and stop scratching the table." Tabitha sat. As Sarah turned to walk back to the service station, the entire restaurant exhaled. Jean-Luc looked like he was about to faint. The security guards looked at Sarah as if she were a sorceress, but Sarah didn't see the tall, grey-haired man standing in the foyer, dripping wet from the rain, watching the entire exchange. It wasn't Preston Holloway. It was Arthur Crowley, the Holloway family's fixer and Preston's right hand. Crowley pulled out his phone and dialed a private number. "Preston," Crowley said, his eyes fixed on Sarah's retreating back. "I think I found her. I found the one." The adrenaline wore off around 2 a.m. That was when Sarah was taking the subway back to her shoebox apartment in Queens. The reality of what she had done settled in. She had threatened a Holloway. She had almost set off the fire alarm in a Michelin-star restaurant. "I'm going to be fired," she thought, leaning her head against the grimy subway window. "Jean-Luc is going to fire me tomorrow. I'll have to sell my laptop to make rent." When she arrived at L'Éclat the next afternoon for the lunch shift, the atmosphere was weird. Usually, the kitchen was a cacophony of shouting chefs and clanging pans. Today it was quiet. Jean-Luc was waiting for her by the hostess stand. He looked pale. "Sarah," he said, his voice tight. You have visitors." "I can return the uniform," Sarah said quickly, raising her hands. "I washed it. Look, I know I stepped out of line last night, but she was going to—" "Stop," Jean-Luc whispered. "They are in the private dining room. They asked for you specifically." Sarah's stomach dropped. The Holloways. They were going to sue her, or have her arrested. She walked down the plush corridor to the PDR. Her hands were shaking, but she clenched them into fists so no one would see. She pushed open the heavy oak doors. The room was empty, except for one man sitting at the head of the long table. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Sarah's entire education. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and eyes that looked like chipped ice. It was Preston Holloway, the man himself. He wasn't in Tokyo. Standing behind him was the man from the foyer the night before, Arthur Crowley. "Sit," Preston said. He didn't gesture. It was a command. Sarah didn't sit. She stood her ground near the door. "If this is about the lawsuit, Mr. Holloway, I have a public defender on speed dial. Well, I will once I find one." Preston blinked. A flicker of amusement crossed his face. He looked at Crowley. "You were right. She's spirited." Preston placed a folder on the table. "I'm not here to sue you, Miss Jenkins. I'm here to hire you." "I'm a waitress," Sarah said. "I don't think ether systems need someone to balance trays." "I don't need a waitress," Preston said, leaning forward. The air in the room grew heavy. "I need a handler." He opened the folder. It was full of photos. Tabitha in tabloids, Tabitha being dragged out of clubs, Tabitha in a hospital bed. "My daughter is out of control," Preston said, his voice devoid of fatherly warmth. It was the tone of a man discussing a failing asset. Since her mother died 3 years ago, Tabitha has been on a campaign of self-destruction. "I have hired the best psychologists in Vienna. I have hired ex-Navy SEALs as bodyguards. She seduces them, bribes them, or breaks them psychologically. She fired the last nanny by planting cocaine in her luggage at Heathrow." Sarah looked at the photos. "She's grieving. She wants your attention." "I run a company worth $400 billion, Preston snapped. "I don't have time to hold her hand while she grieves. I need her managed. I need her kept out of the press until she turns 21 and her trust fund matures. If she is deemed mentally unfit before then, the board of directors takes control of her shares. If that happens, I lose the majority vote. I lose my company." Sarah felt a chill. It wasn't about Tabitha's well-being. It was about the shares. "What does this have to do with me?" Sarah asked. "Crowley saw what you did last night," Preston said. "You didn't coddle her. You didn't fear her. You neutralized her. You saw right through the act. I was tired, Sarah said. I just wanted to go home. Exactly, Preston said. Everyone else wants something from Tabitha. Money, clout, sex. You just wanted her to stop. That makes you valuable. Preston slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a check. The amount was blank. The job is simple, Preston said. You move into the Holloway estate in the Hamptons. You become her companion, her shadow. You make sure she eats. You make sure she takes her medication. You make sure she doesn't burn down the house or call the New York Times. You keep her alive and quiet for 6 months until the board meeting. And if I say no, then you go back to serving soup. Crowley spoke up for the first time. And we garnish your wages for the emotional distress you caused our client last night. We have lawyers who can keep you in court until you're 80. The carrot and the stick. Sarah looked at the check. She thought about the debt collectors calling her mum. She thought about the master's degree she never finished. She thought about Tabitha's eyes, the terrified girl beneath the monster. I have conditions, Sarah said. Preston raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to negotiate. I'm the only one who got her to sit down, Sarah shot back. Condition 1, you pay off my student loans. All of them. Today. Preston nodded. Done. Pocket change. Condition 2, I'm not a maid. I don't wear a uniform. I answer to no one but you. Acceptable. Condition 3, Sarah stepped closer to the table. If I find out you're hurting her, physically, I walk, and I go to the press. Preston's eyes narrowed. For a moment he looked dangerous. Then he laughed, a cold, dry sound. I don't hurt my daughter, Miss Jenkins. I just neglect her. It's far more efficient. Sarah picked up the pen. She wrote a number on the check. It was an obscene amount of money, enough to buy a house, enough to be free. When do I start? Pack your bags, Crowley said, checking his watch. The helicopter leaves in an hour. The Holloway estate in the Hamptons wasn't a house. It was a fortress of glass and steel perched on a cliff edge, overlooking a churning, grey Atlantic Ocean. It was beautiful, cold, and utterly soulless. Sarah arrived via helicopter, carrying a single duffel bag. She was greeted by the house staff, a small army of people who moved silently and kept their eyes on the floor. Miss Tabitha is in the solarium, the butler, a stiff man named Higgins, informed her. She has been informed of your arrival. She is displeased. I bet she is, Sarah muttered. She found Tabitha in a room made entirely of glass. It was filled with rare orchids. Tabitha was sitting on a white lounge chair, wearing sunglasses, smoking a cigarette. You can't smoke in here, Sarah said, dropping her bag by the door. The orchids need humidity, not nicotine. Tabitha didn't turn around. Ah, the waitress. I heard Daddy bought you. How much were you? Cheaper than the last one, I hope. The last one was a PhD from Yale. Total bore. Sarah walked over and plucked the cigarette from Tabitha's fingers. She crushed it into the soil of a potted plant. I'm not a PhD, Sarah said. And I'm not a nanny. I'm the person who's going to make your life miserable if you try to pull any stunts. Tabitha lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She had been crying, though she'd die before admitting it. You think you're tough because you held a lighter to a sprinkler? Tabitha scoffed. You have no idea what you've walked into, Sarah. This isn't a job. It's a graveyard. What's that supposed to mean? Tabitha stood up. She was taller than Sarah realized. My father thinks I'm crazy. The doctors think I'm bipolar. The press thinks I'm a junkie. Tabitha leaned in close, smelling of expensive perfume and stale smoke. But I'm none of those things. I'm just the only one who knows the truth. The truth about what? Sarah asked. About how my mother really died. Tabitha whispered. Before Sarah could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. Tabitha flinched, a look of genuine terror crossing her face. "He's here," Tabitha whispered. "Who?" "My brother," Tabitha said. "Lucas." Sarah frowned. "Your file said you were an only child." "That's because," Tabitha said, backing away, "Lucas doesn't officially exist, and if he finds you here, well, let's just say he doesn't like new toys." The door to the solarium burst open. The young man standing in the doorway was a masterpiece of genetic engineering and expensive tailoring. He had the same dark hair as Tabitha, but where hers was wild and tangled, his was slicked back with military precision. He wore a cashmere sweater that looked soft enough to sleep in, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tabitha," he said, his voice smooth like bourbon. "Higgins told me we had a stray. I didn't believe him." He stepped into the solarium, crushing a fallen orchid petal under his loafer without noticing. He looked at Sarah. "You must be the new keeper. I'm Lucas. I suppose you could say I'm the spare heir." Sarah didn't shake his hand. She was watching Tabitha. The moment Lucas entered, Tabitha had physically shrunk. The fiery girl who had threatened to burn down a restaurant was gone. In her place was a trembling child, hugging her knees, eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. "Get out, Lucas," Tabitha whispered. "Daddy said you weren't allowed at the estate this month." "Dad says a lot of things," Lucas said, walking over to the drinks cart. He poured himself a whiskey. "But seeing as the board meeting is coming up, he thought I should check on my little sister. Make sure she hasn't, had an episode." He turned to Sarah, flashing a dazzling, conspiratorial grin. "She has episodes, Sees things, hears voices. It's quite tragic, the Holloway curse." "I don't hear voices," Tabitha screamed. The sudden volume made the glass walls vibrate. Lucas didn't flinch. He just took a sip of his drink and looked at Sarah with a "see what I mean" expression. "Manic outbursts, paranoia. You have your work cut out for you, Sarah. Can I call you Sarah?" The last one was Dr. Evans, but she left in tears after Tabitha threw a vase at her. Sarah stepped between them. She used her busy shift body language, feet planted, shoulders square, the stance she used when cutting off a drunk patron at the bar. "I think you should leave," Sarah said. Lucas laughed. "Excuse me, I live here. Well, in the East Wing. You're the help." "I report directly to Preston," Sarah lied smoothly. "And he gave me strict instructions to minimize Tabitha's stress triggers. Right now you are a stress trigger, so take your whiskey and go back to the East Wing. Or I call your father and tell him you're interfering with my work." Lucas's smile vanished. His face went blank, cold and reptilian. He took a step toward Sarah, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and aggression. "You're a waitress, right?" Lucas sneered. "I looked you up. Sarah Jenkins, Queens, failed student, drowning in debt. Don't play the heavy with me, sweetheart. I can have you blacklisted from every restaurant in the city before lunch. And I can tell the press that the spare heir is harassing the staff," Sarah countered, not backing down an inch. "I have nothing to lose, Lucas. That makes me dangerous. Now, walk away." They stared at each other for a long, tense moment. Lucas assessed her, realizing she wasn't bluffing. He huffed a laugh, downed his drink, and slammed the glass on the cart. "Good luck with her," Lucas spat, gesturing to Tabitha. "Don't turn your back on her. She's a killer. Just ask her mum." With that poisoned barb, he turned and left. As soon as the door clicked shut, Tabitha uncurled. She looked at Sarah, her eyes wide with shock. "Nobody talks to Lucas like that," Tabitha said. "He's Daddy's favorite. He's the brilliant one, The VP of Operations. He's a bully, Sarah said, grabbing a watering can. She started watering the thirsty orchids. Who is he, really? The file said you were an only child. He's my cousin, Tabitha said, her voice hollow. But my parents adopted him when he was 10 after his folks died. He's perfect. Ivy League, ruthless. He's everything my dad wants me to be. If I'm declared unfit at the board meeting, Lucas gets my voting rights. He gets the company. He gets everything. Sarah paused. So, he has a few billion reasons to make sure you stay crazy. Tabitha looked at her hands. I am crazy, Sarah. I see her. I see my mum, walking the halls at night, wet, dripping wet, because she drowned. She drowned in the pool, and I was the one who found her. Sarah put down the watering can. She sat next to Tabitha. Tell me exactly what happens when you see her. It starts with the smell, Tabitha whispered. Lilacs, her perfume. Then the lights flicker. And then she's there, screaming at me, blaming me. Sarah narrowed her eyes. Lilacs, flickering lights. Waitressing had taught Sarah one crucial thing. Everything is a process. Nothing just happens. If a steak is burnt, the chef was distracted. If a table is wobbly, a screw is loose. If a girl is seeing ghosts, there's a cause. Tabitha, Sarah said firmly, I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in gaslighting. And I think we're going to catch a ghost. For the next 2 weeks, Sarah turned the Holloway mansion into her own personal station. She learned the rhythms of the house. She learned that the maids cleaned the West Wing on Tuesdays. She learned that the security cameras had a blind spot near the library. And she learned that Lucas left the estate every night at 10 p.m. and returned at 2 a.m. She also learned about Tabitha. Tabitha wasn't a brat. She was bored, brilliant, and lonely. When she wasn't medicated into a zombie state, she could code in Python better than most engineers. She read philosophy. She had a biting wit. But every night, she took the blue pills Lucas's private doctor prescribed, and every night the terrors came. One stormy Thursday, Sarah decided to act. Don't take it, Sarah said, intercepting the little paper cup of pills Tabitha held. I have to, Tabitha said, her hands shaking. Dr. Vane says if I don't, the chemical imbalance gets worse. Dr. Vane is on Lucas's payroll, Sarah said. She took the pills and flushed them down the toilet. Tonight we stay awake, both of us, drink coffee, we wait for the ghost. They sat in Tabitha's bedroom. The storm raged outside, rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The house creaked. At 3:00 a.m. it started. First, the smell. A heavy, cloying scent of lilacs filled the room. It was intense, almost chemical. She's here, Tabitha whimpered, pulling the duvet over her head. I told you. Sarah sniffed the air. It didn't smell like perfume. It smelled like aerosol. She stood up and walked to the ventilation vent near the ceiling. She climbed onto a chair. Sarah, don't! Tabitha cried. She's coming! The lights flickered. Zzzzt, zzzzt. Then a low, moaning sound echoed through the walls. It sounded like a woman drowning. Tabitha, why didn't you save me? The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Tabitha was sobbing now, rocking back and forth. This was the moment every other nanny had called the doctor. Every other handler had sedated her. Sarah didn't. Sarah closed her eyes and listened. The acoustics of a restaurant are complex. You have to hear a drink order over the sound of a jazz band. She focused. The voice isn't coming from the walls, Sarah realized. It's coming from the glass. Sarah grabbed a heavy hardcover book from the nightstand. Sarah, stop! Sarah hurled the book at the expensive embedded speaker system in the corner of the room, hidden behind a silk screen. Crash. The silk tore, revealing a high-tech directional speaker. But the voice continued. Sarah ran to the window. The reflection. There was a faint, holographic shimmer in the glass. A projection. "It's a feed!" Sarah shouted over the thunder. "Tabitha, look, it's not a ghost. It's a projection." Sarah grabbed a floor lamp and smashed the small, hidden projector unit concealed in the curtain rod valance. The ghost vanished. The voice cut out instantly. The room was silent, save for the storm and Tabitha's ragged breathing. The smell of lilacs lingered, pumping from a modified air freshener in the vent. Tabitha slowly lowered the blanket. She looked at the smashed electronics. She looked at the vent. It was a machine? Tabitha whispered. "Ether systems," Sarah said, picking up a piece of the broken projector. "Your dad's company makes military-grade psychological warfare tech. Sonic projectors, holograms. Someone rigged your room." Tabitha's face changed. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard rage that matched the look she had given the manager at Leclerc. But this time, it was focused. "Lucas," she said. "He's been driving me insane. For 3 years, he's been making me think I was haunted, so I'd fail the psych evaluation." "We have proof now," Sarah said, holding up the broken device. "We take this to your father." "No," Tabitha said, standing up. She wiped her tears. "Dad won't care. He'll just cover it up to avoid a scandal. He'll send Lucas to Europe and lock me away somewhere safe. If I want to win, I have to beat them at their own game." Tabitha looked at Sarah. "You said you learned about people waiting tables. Can you teach me?" "Teach you what?" "How to read a room," Tabitha said. "How to hide in plain sight. How to serve them exactly what they deserve." Sarah smiled. It was the first time she genuinely liked the girl. "Grab your laptop, kid. We have work to do." The annual Ether Foundation Gala was the social event of the season. It was held in the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel. Every politician, celebrity, and rival tech CEO was there. The plan was simple, according to Lucas's schedule. Tonight was supposed to be Tabitha's public breakdown. He had arranged for her to give a speech honoring her late mother. He expected her to be drugged, hallucinating, and to scream at empty air on live television. It would be the final nail in her coffin before the board meeting on Monday. But Lucas didn't know about the night in the storm. He didn't know that for the last week, Tabitha hadn't been taking the pills. He didn't know that Sarah had been coaching her. Sarah was there, dressed not in a waitress uniform, but in a sleek, black evening gown Tabitha had bought for her. She blended in perfectly. She had a headset in her ear. "Target is moving," Sarah whispered into her lapel mic. "Lucas is at the bar. He just bribed the bartender. He's spiking your champagne." "Copy that," Tabitha's voice came through clear. She was backstage, pacing. "I'm ready." "Remember," Sarah said, "shoulders back, chin up. Don't look at the audience as a whole. Pick one person. Make them uncomfortable." "Got it, coach." The lights dimmed. Preston Holloway took the stage. He looked tired. "Ladies and gentlemen," Preston said, "my daughter Tabitha has insisted on saying a few words tonight. Please bear with her. It is an emotional night." The audience murmured. They all knew the rumors. They had their phones out, ready to record the train wreck. Tabitha walked out. She looked stunning. She wore a white suit, sharp and modern. Her hair was pulled back. She didn't stumble. She didn't shake. She walked to the podium and gripped it. Sarah watched from the side. She saw Lucas standing near the front, smirking. He was holding a glass of champagne, the one meant for Tabitha for the toast. 3 years ago, Tabitha began, her voice steady and commanding. "My mother died, and for 3 years I have been unwell." Lucas nodded to himself. Here it comes, he thought. The breakdown. I heard voices, Tabitha continued. I saw things. I thought I was losing my mind. But recently I found clarity. She looked directly at Lucas. She held his gaze. I realized that the ghosts haunting me weren't supernatural, Tabitha said. They were technological. The room went quiet. Preston frowned, stepping forward. Tabitha, that's enough. I'm not done, Father, she snapped. The authority in her voice stopped him cold. Tonight I was supposed to have an episode, Tabitha said. I was supposed to drink a toast that would make me incoherent. But I think I'll skip the drink. She gestured to the screen behind her. Instead, I'd like to show you a home movie. Sarah hit the button on the remote in her clutch. The massive screen behind the stage flickered to life. It wasn't a tribute video. It was security footage from inside Tabitha's bedroom. It was grainy, night vision footage. It showed a figure entering the room while Tabitha slept. The figure was adjusting a device in the vent. The figure turned to the camera. It was Lucas. The crowd gasped. The video cut to another clip. Audio this time. It was a recording Sarah had made on her phone 2 days ago, hiding in the library while Lucas spoke to Dr. Vane. Lucas's voice. Up the dosage, Vane. She's looking too lucid. I need her drooling by the gala. If she makes it to the board meeting sane, I don't get the shares. And if I don't get the shares, you don't get your research grant. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence Sarah knew well. The silence before a bar fight breaks out. Lucas dropped his glass. It shattered, champagne soaking his shoes. Tabitha leaned into the microphone. My mother didn't drown by accident. She was investigating embezzlement within the company. She found out someone was siphoning millions into offshore accounts. She was silenced. She pointed a finger at Lucas. And for 3 years, you tried to silence me too. Because I saw you there that night, Lucas. I was too drugged up to remember until now, but I saw you by the pool. Preston Holloway turned slowly to look at Lucas. His face was purple with rage. Is this true? Lucas panicked. He looked around, seeing the cameras, the judging eyes of the elite. She's crazy. It's a deep fake. She's off her meds. I'm perfectly sober, Lucas, Tabitha said coldly. But you look like you need a drink. Lucas lunged. He didn't think. He just snapped. He rushed the stage, his face twisted in a snarl. You little witch! I'll kill you! Security was too slow. Preston was too old. But Sarah was ready. Sarah had spent 5 years carrying heavy trays through crowded rooms, dodging drunk patrons and breaking up fights. She moved on instinct. As Lucas vaulted onto the stage, Sarah sprinted from the wings. She didn't tackle him. She tripped him. She stuck her leg out with perfect timing, using his own momentum against him. Lucas went flying. He crashed into the podium, sending the microphone screeching. Before he could scramble up, Sarah was on him. She twisted his arm behind his back in a joint lock she'd learned from a bouncer named Mike in the Bronx. Stay down, Sarah yelled, driving her knee into his back. Lucas thrashed, screaming profanities. Get off me. Do you know who I am? Yeah, Sarah panted, looking up at the cameras flashing wildly. You're the guy who forgot to tip the waitress. Security finally swarmed the stage. They hauled a screaming Lucas away. Tabitha stood over him, unshaken. She looked at her father. Preston looked at his daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in years. He saw the steel in her spine. He saw the Holloway fire. He walked over to the microphone, adjusted it, and looked at the crowd. The board meeting is Monday, Preston said, his voice grueling. And I believe my daughter has a few motions to propose. He looked at Sarah, who was smoothing down her gown. He gave her a curt nod. It was the closest thing to gratitude Preston Holloway was capable of. The crowd erupted, not in polite applause but in chaos, Reporters were shouting questions. Sarah walked over to Tabitha. Tabitha was trembling now, the adrenaline fading. "We did it," Tabitha whispered. "Not yet," Sarah said, scanning the room. She saw Arthur Crowley, the fixer, slipping out the side exit. He was on his phone. He didn't look happy. "Lucas was the pawn," Sarah said, grabbing Tabitha's arm. "But he didn't embezzle the money alone. Someone had to help him cook the books. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried." Tabitha's eyes widened. "Crowley." "The night isn't over," Sarah said. "We have one more rat to catch." The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel had turned into a shark tank of flashing lights. Security was dragging a screaming Lucas Holloway off the stage, his confession still echoing in the stunned silence of New York's elite. But Sarah Jenkins wasn't watching the stage. She was watching the side exit. She saw the heavy velvet curtain ripple. Arthur Crowley, the Holloway family fixer, the man who knew where every body was buried, had just slipped out. "He's running," Sarah said, grabbing Tabitha's arm. Tabitha was shaking, the adrenaline of her speech fading into shock. "Let him run," Tabitha whispered. "We got Lucas, we won." "Lucas is a moron," Sarah snapped, pulling Tabitha toward the service exit. "He doesn't know how to set up offshore shell companies. He doesn't know how to hack medical records to gaslight you. Crowley is the brain. If he leaves the country, the money disappears, and the proof that he murdered your mother goes with him." Tabitha's eyes widened. The realization hit her like a slap. The jet. The Gulf Stream is always fueled at Teterboro. He keeps a go-bag in the cockpit. "We have 40 minutes before he's in international airspace." Sarah checked her watch. "And we don't have a car." They burst out of the kitchen exit into the pouring rain. The valet stand was a disaster zone, gridlocked with limousines trying to flee the scandal inside. "We'll never get a cab," Sarah cursed. Tabitha stopped. She looked at the valet key rack. She looked at the young attendant, a kid named Marco whom she had tipped earlier. "Marco," Tabitha said, her voice dropping the tremble and turning into steel. "Give me the keys to my father's Aston Martin." "Miss Holloway, I can't," the kid stammered. "Your father—" "My father is currently watching his legacy burn," Tabitha cut him off. "Give me the keys, or I tell everyone you're the one who let the paparazzi in last week." Marco tossed the keys. Tabitha caught them. The engine of the silver Aston Martin Vantage roared to life a second later. "Get in!" Tabitha yelled over the engine. Sarah jumped into the passenger seat. "I didn't know you could drive." "I can't," Tabitha grinned, punching the gas. "I just know how to go fast." The drive to Teterboro was a blur of rain-slicked asphalt and terror. Tabitha drove with the reckless precision of someone who had spent years wishing for a crash, weaving through the Lincoln Tunnel traffic at 80 miles an hour. "He's going to be airborne by the time we get there," Sarah shouted, gripping the dashboard. "I need to make a call. To the police." Tabitha swerved around a taxi. "They need a warrant. Crowley owns the judges." "Not the police," Sarah said, dialing a number on her cracked screen. "I'm calling the people who actually run the airport." Teterboro Airport was a fortress of chain-link fences and floodlights. When the Aston Martin screeched up to the perimeter gate, the security guard stepped out to block them. Tabitha didn't stop. She smashed through the wooden barrier arm, sending splinters flying. "Okay," Sarah exhaled. "That's a felony." "Put it on my tab," Tabitha gritted out. They sped onto the tarmac. In the distance, near Hangar 4, the sleek black Gulfstream GSX-50 was already moving. Its navigation lights were blinking, and the whine of the turbines was deafening. It was turning toward the main runway. "He's taxiing!" Sarah yelled. "He's going to take off!" "Not today," Tabitha said. She slammed the accelerator. The car surged forward, racing parallel to the jet. The pilot saw them. The nose of the plane dipped as he tried to brake, but a fully fueled jet doesn't stop on a dime. Tabitha cut the wheel hard to the left. The Aston Martin drifted, tires screaming, and slid sideways directly into the path of the jet. She slammed the brakes, stopping the car 50 yards in front of the plane's nose gear. It was a stalemate. Metal against metal. The jet engine spooled down from a scream to a whine. The door hissed open. Arthur Crowley stepped out onto the mobile stairs. He was wearing a trench coat, clutching a leather briefcase to his chest. He looked annoyed, not scared. He checked his watch as he descended the stairs, flanked by his personal bodyguard, a giant of a man who looked like he bent steel for fun. "Dramatic," Crowley called out, his voice smooth, even over the wind. "I expected nothing less from you, Tabitha. But this is a waste of time." Tabitha stepped out of the car, rain soaking her white evening gown. "It's over, Arthur. Lucas talked. We know about the Cayman accounts. We know you ordered the hit on my mother because she found the defective guidance chips." Crowley sighed, shaking his head. "Lucas is a hysterical child. His testimony is worthless, and by the time the auditors untangle my web of shell companies, I will be enjoying a very comfortable retirement in a country with no extradition treaty." He patted the briefcase. "Bearer bonds, my dear. Untraceable. $500 million. He looked at Sarah, offering a cold, condescending sneer. "And you, the waitress. You played your part well. But the game is over. Move the car, or my associate removes you from it." The bodyguard cracked his knuckles and stepped forward, reaching for a weapon inside his jacket. Tabitha flinched, but Sarah didn't move. She stood in the rain, arms crossed, looking at Crowley with an expression of absolute calm. "You think you're untouchable because you signed the checks," Sarah said loudly. "I am untouchable because I own the system," Crowley replied. "I own the security. I own the silence." "You own the suits," Sarah corrected. "But you forgot who keeps your world running, Arthur. You forgot the invisible people." Crowley frowned. "What are you babbling about?" Sarah raised her hand and snapped her fingers. Suddenly, the floodlights of Hangar 4, Hangar 5, and the maintenance depot all snapped on at once, bathing the tarmac in blinding white light. The rolling doors of the maintenance bays opened. From the shadows they walked out. A fuel truck driver in a reflective vest stepped out from behind the jet's wing, holding a heavy tire iron. 2 baggage handlers dropped their cargo and walked onto the runway, blocking the path behind the jet. A mechanic, wiping grease from his hands with a rag, stepped out of the depot. The catering van driver pulled her vehicle up, blocking the taxiway. Dozens of them. The ground crew, the janitors, the people Arthur Crowley had walked past for 20 years without ever making eye contact. Crowley spun around. He was surrounded. "What is this?" Crowley's voice cracked. "Security! Get these people out of here!" "Security isn't coming, Mr. Crowley," the mechanic called out. His name was Mike, and he wore a Union Steward patch. "We closed the airport. Hazard on the runway." Sarah walked closer. "I used to work double shifts at a diner where Mike's brother is a regular. I made a phone call on the way here. I told them a man was trying to flee with stolen pension funds." She pointed at the fuel driver. "That's Eddie. He heard you screaming at your pilot about the flight plan to the Caymans." She pointed at the catering driver. "That's Maria. She found the shredded documents you tried to hide in the trash bin of the VIP lounge last week. She didn't burn them. She taped them back together." "The working class talks, Arthur," Sarah said, her voice hard as iron. "We see everything. We hear everything. And unlike your board of directors, we look out for each other." Crowley looked at his bodyguard. The bodyguard looked at the mob of 50 angry workers holding wrenches and fire extinguishers. The bodyguard slowly raised his hands, backed away, and left Crowley standing alone in the rain. "You can't do this," Crowley stammered, hugging the briefcase tighter. "I am a citizen of—" "You're a thief," Tabitha said, walking up to him. She didn't yell. She didn't strike him. She just reached out and firmly pulled the briefcase from his grip. He was too shocked to resist. Tabitha opened the case. Inside were stacks of bonds and a thick blue file folder. She opened the folder. "The safety reports," Tabitha whispered, reading the documents. "You knew the tech was bad. You killed my mother to save the stock price." Sirens finally pierced the standoff. Real police cars, followed by FBI SUVs, swarmed onto the tarmac, weaving through the blockade of service vehicles. Preston Holloway was in the first car. He jumped out, his tuxedo ruined by the weather. He looked older than time. He looked at Crowley, then at the workers surrounding him, and finally at his daughter. "Take him," Preston said to the FBI agents, his voice hollow, "and take everything he has." As they handcuffed Crowley and shoved him into the back of a cruiser, he screamed obscenities at Sarah. He called her a peasant, a rat, a nobody. Sarah just watched him go, then turned to the mechanic. "Thanks, Mike. I owe you a burger." "Make it a steak, kid," Mike grinned, tipping his cap. "And tell your friend she drives like a maniac." The adrenaline crash hit Sarah about an hour later. They were sitting in the back of an ambulance, draped in shock blankets, drinking terrible vending machine coffee. Preston Holloway approached them. He stood awkwardly in the rain, a billionaire humbled by a waitress. "I didn't know," Preston said quietly. "I knew Crowley was ruthless. But I didn't know about your mother." "You didn't want to know," Tabitha said, sipping her coffee. "It was easier to let him handle everything. It was easier to think I was crazy than to admit your empire was built on blood." Preston nodded slowly. "You're right." He turned to Sarah. "You saved my daughter, Miss Jenkins, and you saved the company. I will honor our agreement. Your loans are paid, plus the stipend. I'll wire triple the amount in the morning." Sarah nodded. "Thanks. That buys a lot of freedom." "What will you do?" Preston asked. "Go back to school?" Sarah looked at the runway. She thought about the psychology degree she had abandoned. She thought about the restaurant. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "Maybe open a place of my own." Preston walked away to deal with the lawyers. Tabitha sat in silence for a long time. "Don't do it," Tabitha said suddenly. "Don't do what?" "Don't open a restaurant. You'll get bored in a week." Tabitha turned to face her. "You have a talent, Sarah. You see things other people ignore. You understand how systems work and how to break them." "I'm just a waitress who pays attention, Tabitha." "That's exactly what I need," Tabitha said, pulling the blanket tighter. "I'm taking the seat on the board, Lucas's seat. And I'm going to clean house. I'm going to turn ether systems inside out. But I can't do it alone. The snakes are still in the grass. I need a partner who can smell a rat from a mile away." Tabitha held out her hand. "Come work for me. VP of Internal Operations, or Chief of Keeping It Real. I don't care what the title is." Sarah looked at the hand. It was steady now. "I'm expensive," Sarah warned. "And I don't wear suits." "Wear whatever you want," Tabitha smiled. "Just don't let me turn into my father." Sarah took her hand. "Deal." Epilogue. 6 months later. The lunch rush at L'Eclat was in full swing. Sarah Jenkins sat at table 1. She was wearing a leather jacket and jeans, a stark contrast to the suits surrounding her. She was reading a report on a tablet. The headline of the Wall Street Journal on the table read, "Holloway Foundation launches Whistleblower Protection Fund." "Your sparkling water, madame," a voice said. Sarah looked up. It was a young, terrified waiter named David. He looked exactly like she had 6 months ago. Exhausted. Scared. "David," Sarah said gently. "Yes, Mum?" "Table 4 is about to complain that their soup is cold. Go heat it up before you bring it out. And the guy at table 7 is cheating on his wife. Don't seat them near the window. He wants privacy. He'll tip better if he feels hidden." David stared at her, as if she were a wizard. "Who are you?" Tabitha Halloway slid into the seat opposite Sarah, looking radiant. "She's the boss," Tabitha told the waiter, "and you better listen to her, David. She sees everything." As David scurried off, Tabitha stole a piece of bread from Sarah's basket. "Did we get the contract?" "We did," Sarah said. "The Defense Department agreed to the new oversight protocols. Clean tech only." "Good," Tabitha smiled. "And Crowley?" "Sentenced this morning," Sarah said. 20 years. Minimum security. But his cellmate is a former union rep he laid off in the 90s. Fate has a sense of humor. Sarah raised her glass. "To fate." Tabitha raised hers. "No, to the help." They clinked glasses. Across the room, Jean-Luc watched them. He saw the billionaire heiress and the former waitress, laughing as they redrew the corporate world on a napkin. He shook his head in amazement and turned to his staff. "Excellent service today, everyone," Jean-Luc whispered. "You never know who is watching." And that, my friends, is the story of how Sarah Jenkins went from serving appetizers to serving justice. It's a wild reminder that power isn't about the suit you wear or the bank account you have. It's about observation, empathy, and the courage to light a match when the room gets too dark. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Sarah made the right choice, taking the job at the end? Or should she have taken the money and opened that coffee shop? And honestly, how satisfying was it to see the invisible army of workers save the day at the airport? If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It tells YouTube that you want more long-form stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're the first to hear next week's saga. Until next time, treat everyone with respect. Because you never know when you might need a mechanic to stop a jet plane. Thanks for watching.